Hey there, you boys, ghouls, and non-binaries. It's time for the Doomtrain. Today we're gonna party like it is 2006. So break out those hot topics, break out those Invader Zims, break out those Naruto headbands, break out those Johnny the Homicidal Maniacs. But that's probably gonna be a different day. I've never actually read that. Nightmare Before Christmas, y'all. This one seems to be a Disney fan favorite, and I actually have never seen it until like earlier today. And that was a last second choice because I think I'm just stalling to get around to those Saw movies now. I've seen a bunch of them, but fuck me if I know what happens in them. Um, and I also was still in a cartoon mood, but I should probably think twice before going to that well again because I really, really like talking about cartoons, and that is a finite well that I can keep going back to, because we can very easily dwindle that down to Beetlejuice, Courage, Ghostbusters, or well, the real Ghostbusters, and those really dark Scooby Doo movies. So we gotta go a little light on those. So Nightmare Before Christmas was one of I don't really know what the word for it is because it seems to be a pretty popular Disney movie, but I'm gonna go with it's one of those Disney movies. Um, in that it doesn't really fit the Disney formula very well. Like it's a stop motion piece done by Tim Burton, who we're gonna talk about a couple of times on this podcast. That Tim Burton boy, we will get around to him more later. But today, Nightmare Before Christmas. I believe this is his. No, this wouldn't have been his first major work, but I think it's his first major animated work. And boy, did it inspire a lot of other things for children's movies that look really weird. Initially, Disney outported this one for publishing to Touchstone because they figured that it would be, oh, it's too spooky for the children. And some people go, oh, that's nonsense. I think I saw it as a child and I was fine. I was dead. I was dead afraid of this movie when I was a child. I was like 3. I vividly remember I was like 3, so I don't. When I said I don't remember it, I mean I don't have active memories of it. Just that I was terrified of it. And looking back on it now, I think I understand why. It's not any of the imagery. Like I thought, Oogie Boogie turning into a bunch of bugs was always kind of cool. Because I believe at the time, The Lion King was already out, and The Lion King's numerous spin-offs had, already begun to take their toll with the Timon and Pumbaa cartoon, so I had kind of already, on some level, made the mental connections with cartoon bugs being delicious. Not actual bugs, I'm terrified of actual bugs, but cartoon bugs, those guys are crunchy and juicy and delicious or whatever have you. The thing that did get me, though, is that what probably actually scared me about this one as a child was the stop motion, possibly. And that may come from, like, they're moving, but they're not quite moving the way something in motion should move because it's stop motion. So, even though I can't quite put my fingers on why these things aren't in motion the way something is in motion, I can tell that, they're alive and moving. So that was, I guess, very distressing for a small child. But looking back on it now, without, the cloud of 2006 Naruto headbands, Linkin Park AMVs over its head, along with, apparently it has a card game back in the day, in the long lost year of 2006, along with numerous MySpaces and Kingdom Hearts. I don't know. I just like talking about the year 2006. This one isn't particularly scary. Like, it definitely does dabble in that area. I want to say relative to 1993, which was its release date. For children's media, it would be considered scary, but, and again, relative to its contemporaries for like children's horror, which would be like Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, it is relatively scary. But we live in the future now, where we have like Five Nights at Freddy's to take care of your children. That legitimately does have some things that are a little bit more on the chilling side, but are content that is primarily produced for children. But that's one that we'll get to another day. So yeah, I believe when it was released, it did fine, I guess. And much like Pixar, it kind of hung around the it's Disney, but there's weird copyright stuff, which is why it's not in Disney's normal wheelhouse, and just kind of hung around there until 2006. I'm guessing it did belong to Disney, but Disney kind of chose not to let it into the wider Disney canon. Again, partially because of its visual aesthetic, which is, in retrospect, very wonderful, and partially because reasons, I guess. Maybe branding, because it didn't quite fit into the Disney brand, because Disney is very notorious for kind of locking out things that don't quite fit into its branding until people like kick and scream for it. To my knowledge, the Goofy movie fandom has kind of been getting the short end of the stick for many years now. And when they did a 20th anniversary reunion, it apparently sold out with people waiting in line like long before the movie started, because Disney had no idea how many people wanted it. Nightmare Before Christmas, it may be a little bit more of a, they know that people want it, but do they know, do they like the visual aesthetic, or do they actually like that movie? Which, for most of the 2000s, probably was a legitimate question, because I'm guessing that most people probably experienced A Nightmare Before Christmas via Kingdom Hearts, actually. But that's neither here nor there. So we're going to do something that we've never done before and attempt to have some structure. So now that I've given you a little bit of context for this, we're gonna jump on over and talk about the plot, because that's something that people want. That's probably not going to work for these longer shows I'm going to get to eventually, or vignette shows. But for movies, that seems to be a pretty good format. So I'll see you back here in less than a second for you. And for me, probably after I take a drink of this water. The movie opens with a musical, as all Disney movies do, describing Halloween Town, a place where ghosts and ghouls run amok, and every day is a countdown to the next Halloween, because that's their favorite day of the year. And it seems kind of like, what if the Addams Family wasn't just, a group of people, but an entire town? They're ghosts, they're ghosts, and probably after I take a drink of this water. The movie opens with a musical, as all Disney movies do, describing Halloween Town, a place where ghosts and ghouls run amok, and every day is a countdown to the next Halloween, because that's their favorite day of the year. And it seems kind of like, what if the Addams Family wasn't just, a group of people, but an entire town? They're ghosts, they're ghosts and ghouls and all sorts of stuff, vampires, werewolves, and other ambiguous Halloween monsters. And just all sorts of scary stuff, singing about how much they love Halloween and how much they love scaring the shit out of everybody. And Jack Skeleton, oh, that's good, that's a good start. Jack Skeleton, the Pumpkin King, leads them in Halloween every year, but lately he's grown a little bit tired of doing the same old thing year in and year out. I mean, scaring people is cool, but on some level he wants something a little bit more. So he wanders out of town into a forest that has a portal to all sorts of other holiday theme zones. There's a portal to Thanksgiving, but that's obviously not the place he goes to. I kind of want to see what's behind that door, but I also don't think I want a sequel to this movie. I mean, it's a good movie, but it's one of those, let's leave this one, as just a good movie and not mess it up. There's a door to Easter Town and all sorts of places, but Jack stumbles through the door of Halloween Town, or I'm sorry, not Halloween Town, to Christmas Town, where he sees all of this wonderful Christmas stuff and gets that warm Christmas spirit. Oh, by the way, this is the Christmas episode. I don't know if I mentioned that. We're probably going to have two, but Christmas. um, and he's seeing all sorts of Christmas stuff and how it's the opposite of scary. Instead of, like, hanging feet, like dismembered feet on the wall, there are trees. Instead of smelling like poop and farts and dead people, it smells like cakes and pies, and he gets that warm, fuzzy Christmas spirit. Well, to the best of his abilities, this is the first time for him seeing anything that's not scary, so he's trying to make sense of all this. So he goes back to town and announces that, you know what, forget this, I'm taking over Christmas. This is really cool. I really got to show everybody. And Jack decides to show everybody in town, and they're just not understanding this. Like, you're saying, there are gifts. Do the gifts hurt you? What's the point? Do they shock you? Do they scare you? These people, they just want to, like, they're not evil. They go out of their way to mention that, the denizens of Halloween Town, they're not bad people. It's just, scaring is what they do. Sort of like a slightly more macabre version of Monsters, Inc. Like, they exist to scare things. They're not trying to hurt you. Although they do things that will certainly hurt you. Or at least the bulk of them anyway. So Jack is trying to explain this, and the people, it's just falling flat. So Jack says, okay, well, this is not working, so I'm going to change the script a little bit. So instead of, describing how wonderful Christmas is, he puts a little bit of a spin on it, describing, Santa Claus as Sandy Claus with his giant claws. He's a giant red man like a lobster who goes on his sleigh ride, S-L-A-Y, not S-L-E-Y. Wait. I don't think that's how you spell that. Oh boy. Well, you guys know what I mean. Like, sleigh is in I'm gonna slay you, not sleigh is in let's go on a sleigh ride. And people are like, oh, okay, well, that makes much more sense. So Jack resigns himself back to his study and conscripts the help of, all the townspeople, now that they're a little bit more on board, to give him a hand with this. In this, the town's mad scientist has created a daughter named Sally. And Sally is kind of not really having any of the mad scientist stuff. Dr. Oh, geez, what's his name? Dr. Finkelstein. Dr. Finkelstein. Sorry, I don't have the best memory there. Dr. Finkelstein and Sally have a little bit of a weird relationship where they do kind of care about each other, but it's a little bit of a old, groggy old dad situation and a rebellious teen daughter thing. Although it's played a little bit more closer to what you'd expect from, well, again, the Addams Family than you would a standard Disney affair. Where this is presented in a more immediate adult who doesn't understand that we live in the future, and young adult character that, is still growing into themselves a little bit. Funny story, she always gets out by poisoning the doctor with all sorts of stuff, like cyanide, nightshade, frog's breath, which is apparently a type of poison, and he's always mad about it, but he's never too mad. This apparently isn't fatal. Maybe everyone is already dead. His daughter Sally is a Frankenstein's monster-esque girl, much like Frankenfran. I think maybe that's the inspiration behind Frankenfran. Who knows? So it's just Sally alone that feels like Jack's plan to import Halloween to Christmas Town, or I'm sorry, import, Christmas to Halloween Town and take over the role of Santa Claus is going to fall apart. And he does not seem to be listening. He's so enraptured with Christmas. He's doing all sorts of experiments to find out how Christmas works because he just doesn't understand it. He's reading his books and studying the scientific method. He even has a book that says scientific method on it. And Jack assigns Lock, Shock, and Barrel, who I always thought it was Lock, Shock, and Terror. I don't know. It's probably because I didn't see this movie until, in full, until recently, And in Kingdom Hearts, it sounds like they're saying lot, shock, and terror. Oh well, doesn't really matter. Three children who are the best trick or treaters. They are really good at it, and he has them go kidnap Santa Claus or Sandy Claus as they know him. Uh, and Jack insists, "Hey, don't get Oogie Boogie into this. Oogie Boogie is this giant, well, not giant, but he's pretty big, sort of demonic entity. I'm trusting he's Halloween Town's version of the Boogeyman. And unlike the rest of Halloween Town's denizens, he actually is evil. He's a load of a jerk. I mean, the other denizens, they love to play pranks and, they talk a big game, but they probably wouldn't actually murder a person. I mean, they might murder, like a zombie or something that will come back to life, or like, murder a ghost, but not kill a dude. But Oogie would totally kill a dude. Speaking of kill a dude, Lock, Shock, and Barrel has, I don't want to say one of my favorite musical numbers in Disney, but because I don't think it's one of the best ones, but it's in my top 10 now, where they talk about how they're gonna kidnap Santa Claus and torture him and feed him to Oogie Boogie, who's gonna gobble him up, and they're gonna do all sorts of stuff. So Santa Claus doesn't want any of that. So shortly thereafter, we meet Oogie Boogie, who's this, well, like I said before, a boogeyman who wants to, play a game with Santa Claus's life at stake, because he loves playing when there's life on the line, but as he says in the movie, not his life, which is, for a villain, I can definitely respect that kind of mentality, especially for a gambling themed villain. I don't really understand his connection to gambling. Like, I more or less understand everyone else's sort of shtick and why they're like that, but I don't get Oogie Boogie's thing with gambling. I mean, it works out pretty well, but I kind of wish he had more gambling puns going on. But his layer is very interesting. It has like things like giant roulette wheels that come down and slot machines that kill you and die everywhere that he seems to always have at all times, and it's super interesting. Uh, so Lock, Shock, and Barrel go and kidnap Santa Claus and bring him back, but turns out it's actually just the Easter Bunny, because they actually have no idea what Santa Claus is supposed to look like. I guess they've mistaken big and red like a lobster for big and pink, and the Easter Bunny, he's terrified. So Jack, who's a very charismatic character, I don't know if I mentioned that, Jack is the kind of character that I don't think we see very much in Disney, who's like this sort of fully formed adult who knows what who knows what he's about. Like, his life is by no extension of the word a failure. Like, he's running Halloween Town, and he doesn't hate Halloween anymore, and it's not like he doesn't want to scare people, but he's just kind of bored with it. And being the leader or master of festivities for Halloween, he has a certain very natural charisma to him, where he can kind of charm people on the spot and switch gears really fast because he's a little bit of a showman. And again, not in like the goofs and jokes sense, but in the sense that he knows how to hold an audience and how to communicate with people. And I think that's a very interesting type of character. So I say this because he very quickly goes from like scolding Lock, Shock, and Barrel to quickly apologizing to the Easter Bunny, going, "Oh, I'm so sorry about this inconvenience." And I thought that particular wording was very interesting, and it kind of shows that there's a little bit of a business mentality to how he handles that, because that is an extremely businessy workplace response to this kind of situation. I've heard it said before that Nightmare Before Christmas is like an allegory for business decisions or something like that, but I don't know if I buy it completely, but it is definitely an interesting idea. So, with Santa Claus now successfully kidnapped, Jack tells him, "Hey, take Santa Claus somewhere where he'll be comfortable." And of course, the kids are lying. And they're just going to take him right over to Oogie Boogie to beat the crap out of him. Um, Santa Claus, super confused and just like, what's going on here? I don't think you understand what is even the case, because for Jack, this is more or less acceptable because he may be down with Halloween, but he doesn't really have much context for it. Like, he's never talked about this with anyone in Christmas Town. He just kind of showed up and said, "Oh, this is really interesting. Well, this is my idea now." So he has questionable ideas like making reindeer out of out of skeletons, and all of his gifts that he's making, like Santa's workshop, are all like these horrible monster toys. Like there's a wooden duck that looks like it's been shot up and has very sharp teeth, and like scary Jack in the Box that come at you, and like instead of like toys, they're like heads. Like they're all wrapped up nice and stuff, albeit in things that look kind of like caskets. Relative to Halloween Town's normal doing, this is probably as Christmassy as they get, and it's very amusing to watch all this play out. So Sally is thinking, okay, this is really not going to work out. I'm getting a real bad feeling. It's implied this might be a supernatural premonition, but they don't go into much detail. But I'm willing to accept magic as something that can reasonably happen here, because who knows what kind of magic the good doctor has in store. He could be a psychic doctor, man. Who knows? So she puts fog water into the town square that makes a very dense fog, hoping that Jack's coffin-like sleigh that's being pulled by skeleton reindeers won't take off. But luckily, or unfortunately, Jack's ghost dog named Zero, which I don't know why it's called Zero. Who knows? Lights up the way, much like Rudolph, and flies out delivering presents to the children all around the world. Like shrunken heads, big snakes that I think are from Beetlejuice or something very similar, and all sorts of scary stuff. And he's thinking he's doing a great job, but everybody is calling the police, saying there's a spooky skeleton going around. He's impersonating Santa. He's dropping all sorts of horrible stuff, and this kind of brings up the question: is Halloween Town like a different dimension, or is it just like a place that happens to have a door that you can go to, like kind of like warp points or something, where you can kind of warp around to all these different places, but you can also just walk to them? Because Jack seems to be able to fly into the the normal human world, away from Halloween Town. Like, I'm guessing that's the case, but I don't know. It's not wholly clear. Maybe it is kind of a warp point the people of Halloween Town just never really thought to leave. I'm guessing that's the case because no one seems to know about Halloween Town, or this forest where there are all these doors that lead to other dimensions or far off holiday themed nations. Huh. Okay, so as Jack seems to be doing what's tantamount to terrorism, the military get involved because there's a skeleton murdering people, seemingly. So they're trying to shoot Jack out of the sky with bombs and missiles and all sorts of stuff, and he's thinking, oh, this is great, they're shooting fireworks. But no, he is shot out of the sky, and he's dead now. Sorry. That's the end of the movie, y'all. Go home. That's actually not the end of the movie. So back over with Sally. She's still having a real bad feeling about this. She's more or less correct now because Jack is just dead. And Oogie Boogie has captured Santa Claus and is torturing him with all these bizarre gambling-based games, and has them all locked up and all sorts of things that probably shouldn't be in a kids movie. But whatever. That's fine. Kids are smart. It's good. So she uses her being dead, or like an amalgamation powers, to put a little leg down in Oogie Boogie's torture chamber, like a very seductive, well, relative to this movie, leg. And he's like, "Oh, Santa Claus, check that out, a sexy girl leg." So he goes over there, feeling up the leg, because that's what you do when girls put their legs out, right? You just walk over and feel up that leg. Don't need to see the rest of that body. You just feel up that leg, taking the foot off, and Meanwhile, Sally's hands are reaching down there for Santa Claus. They're um, unlocking him, trying to get him free. She drops down a ladder so Santa can get out. And Oogie Boogie's like, hey, wait a minute. Hold up. You're trying to get away, aren't you? So he puts him in his double torture room. I don't know. I guess he has a lot of those, but I guess if you're the boogeyman, you need you can't just have one torture room. Like, some people aren't just satisfied with one bathroom, so why would the king of horror and nightmares, besides Jack Skellington, you know, only have one torture room, which is fair. So Jack is pretty bummed that he's been shot out of the sky, and he seems to have entirely wrecked Christmas and had a total misunderstanding of this. But he quickly regains consciousness and thinks up a bunch of new plans for Halloween for next year, because, you know, maybe Christmas might not be his thing, but Jack is very optimistic and is a wonderful boy. So meanwhile, Jack quickly leaves back to Halloween Town to free Santa, immediately seeming to know that he's been captured by Oogie Boogie, because I suppose that's probably the only place where he could reasonably be. And he's in Oogie Boogie's lair, and Oogie Boogie immediately springs a trap on Jack with a bunch of playing cards, specifically kings, but, you know, they all spin their swords around trying to cut him up. Oogie is able to outrun the swords, but Jack follows suit. That's a good pun. Are you happy about that? By twisting down into a spider shape and crawling around trying to catch up with Oogie. Then a sort of chase scene ensues on like this giant roulette wheel where Oogie has these this arm slot machine where three guys come out and like shoot guns, but Jack follows suit, and Oogie sends like a giant buzzsaw with this cool skeleton on it, and I wonder how he got. You know, there's so much stuff in the background of this movie. Like, I know I'm describing it because some people may be kind of into this without necessarily seeing the movie, which I respect. I watch a lot of movie podcasts where where I don't necessarily see the movie. This is one where you may want to check out because it has a sort of Futurama vibe going where there's all sorts of stuff in the background and you really can't keep up with it. But yeah, Oogie Boogie, like, he takes off on this big spinning claw, and Jack is like, hey, you're real mean to my friends. This is an episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! You gotta be real nice to my friends. So he grabs one of Oogie Boogie's strings, because Oogie Boogie is sort of this this big sack, like potato sack man. And this kind of unravels Oogie Boogie as it would be, unravel his seams, and then his whole gut situation, those bugs I was talking about earlier, all spill into the lava, which was actually a little bit horrific. So Santa calls Jack a fucking moron for doing any of this, and Jack is like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry, Santa. Is there a way to fix this?" And Santa's like, yes, I'm fucking Santa. Are you an idiot? I'm a big old magic man. You just took my hat. The hat is what makes the Santa magic. Well, he doesn't say that, but that seems to be the implication. So Santa Claus flying off makes snow happens. And this would be a bitter end to the movie, and I thought that's where it was going to end. But after seeing snow, the people of Halloween Town, in their own sort of Halloween way, get Christmas a little bit more and understand where Jack is coming from, and they're playing in the snow and they don't understand what's going on, but they're happy about it anyway. And Jack follows Sally up to the big old testicular, well, not testicular, but the big iconic hill with the twisty bit at the end, and they're like, hey, you know, we really love each other, and that's the thing that Jack is too blinded by science to see, but hey, now they really like each other and they kiss under the full moon. And that was the plot. So I'll be right back with my last thoughts on it. It was a good movie. I guess that's all I really have to say about it. Well, that's not true. So this is one of those Disney movies that apparently it was pitched long before its actual production, and Disney basically said, okay, this is good, but also it's weird, so you can take this and go somewhere else. So then Tim Burton went off and made Beetlejuice and Batman, and I think at this point he's already done Edward Scissorhands, but I'm not 100% sure. So, even though Disney weren't really fans of this project, hey, it's Tim Burton. He made Beetlejuice and a Batman movie that wasn't regarded as terrible until years later, at least I believe so. Uh, so eventually, this movie ended up coming through with the help of a lot of other people besides Tim Burton who actually wanted this project to happen. And unlike a lot of other of the weird Disney movies, it didn't, or rather, its production hell was only a couple of years and not like 10 plus years like Atlantis or An Emperor's New Groove. So that said, this movie kind of. So I'll be right back with my last thoughts on it. It was a good movie. I guess that's all I really have to say about it. Well, that's not true. So this is one of those Disney movies that apparently it was pitched long before its actual production, and Disney basically said, okay, this is good, but also it's weird, so you can take this and go somewhere else. So then Tim Burton went off and made Beetlejuice and Batman, and I think at this point he's already done Edward Scissorhands, but I'm not 100% sure. So, even though Disney weren't really fans of this project, hey, it's Tim Burton. He made Beetlejuice and a Batman movie that wasn't regarded as terrible until years later, at least I believe so. So eventually, this movie ended up coming through with the help of a lot of other people besides Tim Burton who actually wanted this project to happen. And unlike a lot of other of the weird Disney movies, it didn't, or rather, its production hell was only a couple of years and not like 10 plus years like Atlantis or An Emperor's New Groove. So that said, this movie kind of went through a little bit of a rediscovery during the mid 2000s, as I alluded to at the beginning. There, I want to say this is partially because the goth aesthetic was getting a little bit more popular, along with more mainstream stores like Hot Topic carrying this kind of stuff, and also, the holy trifecta of slightly edgy stuff, Hot Topic and Kingdom Hearts, because the 2000s is not complete until you mention Kingdom Hearts deliberately. And among the worlds of Kingdom Hearts that, even though it's always regarded as a very good game, a lot of the way the Disney worlds are portrayed came out as a little bit empty. Like the Agrabah world based on Aladdin is just no one's here. There's nothing going on. But among all the Disney worlds in that game, Nightmare Before Christmas was definitely the most lively and seemed like it had the most heart put into it, including things like, hey, there are all these, original OC monsters running around, and the characters of Halloween Town have a little bit more relationship with the monsters or the Heartless in game, whereas other Disney characters are like, oh no, a monster. These guys are like, oh cool, monsters. Hey, let's figure out how to do something with these. I like that they're scary and they hurt people, but maybe they're a little bit too intense. Let's calm it down a little bit. And again, it was just a time of being edgy. There was actually a prequel and a sequel to this movie, both of which were video games. For a long time, Disney had toyed with the idea of making a sequel, but that just never panned through because they kind of wanted to make it a Disney direct-to-DVD sequel, and it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been stop animation, it would have been 3D or traditionally animated, and Tim Burton just wasn't wholly wild for that, and I think this is definitely one of those movies that seems like it should have a sequel, and it definitely does have an interesting enough world, but it's probably one of those things where we should more than likely leave this sort of thing be and let it just kind of come from the very bizarre mind of Tim Burton and sort of let it rest as it will be. Of course, there'll always be more merchandise of it. That basically has never stopped. I think at some point there may have been a Nightmare Before Christmas card game because everything in the... Well, I can't keep saying the 2000 because if someone finds this in 2050, they're not going to be sure what year I'm talking about. I hear some people call it the aughts, but we don't call them aughts in America. Like, aught doesn't mean zero, but... Or the naughties, but not also doesn't quite mean the same thing. But you guys know what I mean now that I've said aughts and naughties. Yeah, everything had a card game, and I didn't play it because at the time I was just too deep into that Yu-Gi-Oh game. You know what I mean? And also, no one played it. Sad times. And I was also too poor to afford any of the countless amounts of merch, which, on one hand, oh, poor tiny old me as a 14 or 15-year-old child, but on the other hand, there aren't any embarrassing photos of me out there with, like, my Nightmare Before Christmas faded jacket Naruto headband. So, bullet dodged, I guess. Yeah, that sequel and prequel I was talking about, both of them were video games. Nightmare Before Christmas Pumpkin King, which was a Game Boy Advance game that was a Metroidvania game. Maybe we'll talk about Metroid and Castlevania one day. I'm not sure. That is a prequel, and Nightmare Before Christmas Oogie's Revenge, which is a sequel, which is weird because Oogie Boogie should be super dead. But I didn't play them because, to my knowledge, they were extremely unfun. And I also remember GameStop having very nice special editions of it with a really shiny box. Again, being really poor let me dodge a bullet on buying those games. Now you may be wondering, hey, but didn't you not see this movie until like yesterday or today or whatever? True, but also I'm an impressionable teenager. Well, not anymore, but you know what I mean. Huh. No, I should really get good at these segues. Well, anyway, it was a good movie, and even though it technically isn't all that scary, has a lot of weird, spooky stuff in the background, and Halloween, so, that's close enough for me. Has Halloween in it, sign me up. I feel like I'm going to go back on those words one day, and I'm going to deeply regret it. Well, anyway, next time, you probably shouldn't even bother trying to predict what I'm going to do in the future, because it's probably not going to happen. I'm guessing another Christmas movie, maybe? It's probably not going to be a cartoon, but I've lied to you before, and I'll do it again. So, until next time, I have been your host, Sid, and if you dug this, check out my YouTube series, Manga Macabre, where I do a not great impression of Cecil from Welcome to Night Vale, and I share with you all sorts of horror, anime, and manga. And if you enjoyed this, which you might if you had stayed all the way until the end. If you didn't enjoy this, you're a good person. Also, maybe check out Shovelware, a video game podcast on SoundCloud, where me and my good buddy Bobby, we talk about video games, and usually we end up only talking about video games for maybe 5 minutes and veering off into talking about Dragon Ball Z or something like that. So, also follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/SidAghast. So, do that, and while you're doing that, I'm gonna go lay down. I'm gonna rethink my life choices and all the terrible choices I've made, and yeah. So everybody, have a Merry Christmas, or alternatively, just basically hibernate until Christmas is over, so you can just skip over that seasonal depression, like forget about your wife leaving you, or not having family, or the fire in which you lost everything. And just set an alarm for my social media platform, so when I update, you'll just wake up and go, oh, that was cool. And then you'll go back to sleep to avoid a one-way ticket to Sad Town because of all the horrible things that have happened during your life. I have been Sid. This has been the Doomtrain, and don't forget the ride never ends. Just basically hibernate until Christmas is over, so you can just skip over that seasonal depression. Like forget about your wife leaving you, or not having family, or the fire in which you lost everything. And just set an alarm for my social media platform, so when I update, you'll just wake up and go, oh, that was cool, and then you'll go back to sleep to avoid a one-way ticket to Sad Town because of all the horrible things that have happened during your life. I have been Sid. This has been the Doom Train, and don't forget the ride never ends. And don't forget the ride never ends.